Of course.
Okay. Okay, I think I'll just do what the musicians do, just like, yeah, okay. First, I'd like to begin by starting off by stating what traditionally Muslims do by making a public announcement that they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means that we all believe in the same God, and that we worship this one God universally. And the way it's recited in Arabic is Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, which basically also means that in addition to believing that there's only one God, that I also attest publicly that I believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, is the final messenger of God. I do believe that, but again, that's my own personal belief. And I do not espouse, nor do I endorse enforcing my own personal beliefs on others. Which leads me to the topic of my conversations, which is Islamophobia, prejudice and discrimination, not simply a fear of Islam. Essentially, it is a prejudicial attitude of reducing Muslims to a singular identity. And that identity, according to Islamophobia, composed of negative traits, believed to be Islamic, and the type of discrimination that treats a person unfavorably. Now, what does that mean? It means unfavorably in terms of speech and action on account of his or her Islamic identity. Now, Islamic identity is something of which to be an unknown to the majority of Americans. And I will shortly go into exactly what that means in terms of unknown percentages of Americans. And I am American myself, being born and raised here in the United States. And so therefore, I will go into a little bit of what the polls had said over a period of 20 years regarding what Islamophobia means, and also describing the general feelings and attitudes towards Islam and Muslims. So let's talk first and foremost, before we get into the polls and what the general public feels about Muslims and Islam, let's first talk about the Muslim identity in a non-scholarly fashion. And what does this mean? Well, let's first take a look at what the book says according to what Muslims believe in. We call it the Quran. The Quran literally means recitation. And it sounds like this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, which means literally, I seek refuge in God from shaitan, from evil, and in the name of God who is merciful and extremely merciful. And there's an interesting chapter that was revealed essentially about the identity of what it means to be a Muslim, because when it was revealed a very long time ago, people were basically unknown to Islam. They did not know what it means. It was pretty scary because it contradicted the cultural norms of that time. So they didn't understand what it meant to be Muslim, even when people converted into Islam. So here is a chapter. It sounds like this. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِّكَ الَّذِي يَدْعُو الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَىٰ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ فَوَيْلٌ لِّلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَن صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. So, essentially, this is what it translates to. It says, have you seen the one who denies the moral way of life? And I know in today's media sensationalization of what Islam is, we pretty much have a determination of what immorality is. So, have you seen the one who denies the moral way of life? I know I have, and I know you have too, in some way, in some form. This individual pushes orphans aside, doesn't encourage the poor, the feeding of the poor, that is. Also, when this person prays, that they are careless when they're alone in their sincerity of devotion to God. They're only praying in public because it's expected, it's the norm of their community. And even more profound, those individuals who deny morality, the good things, the good deeds in life, they refuse even to share the simplest of favors. Like when somebody asks, can you please pass the salt, and you just don't. Or how about holding the door for someone in public and you fail to acknowledge that person behind you, so therefore you don't. Those are the small actions that the Muslim identity is really all about. Not what I would say what people would believe in or would care to believe what Muslims are. So let's talk about Islamophobia defined. Islamophobia is prejudice towards or discrimination against Muslims due to their religion or perceived religious, national, or ethnic identity associated with Islam. Now let me tell you what Islamophobia is not. Rational criticism of Islam or Muslim based on factual evidence. That is not Islamophobia. So we have basic tenets, such as we believe that there is monotheism, we believe in fasting, we pray 5 times a day, we believe in Hajj, we also believe in giving to the poor. If you disagree with that, that's not Islamophobia, that's factual. We do those things. That's what Islam is. It's called the 5 pillars. So let's continue about a little bit about what Islamophobia is, and how Georgetown University Research, they conducted a project on Islamophobia. They're based out in Washington, D.C. The polling was released on November 19th, 2015, so I do encourage all of you to read that online, and the survey polling was between 1993 and 2014. It was 179 polls, 480 questions, and here are the key findings in less than 4 minutes. Number 1, many Americans have a tendency to become suspicious of Islam and Muslims when it's presented on a global scale, or tied up in political controversies like the Ground Zero Project in 2010. However, there is more support of Muslims when it comes to local contexts, like a mosque building in neighborhoods. So we would not find very much discrimination or prejudice against such things locally. Number 2, a majority of Americans have consistently claimed to be uninformed about Islam, and that less than half have said they know a Muslim personally. Number 3, the Iraq War, not September 11th, or 9/11, better known as. So the Iraq War was a turning point for America of Islam, the views, that is. That was a turning point. Polling data found that during the middle of the Iraq War, positive views of Muslims, of Islam, that is, it declined, with negative views outweighing positive ones. Number 4, Americans have consistently felt colder, quote unquote, towards Muslims than another religious group, with at least 1 in 5 Americans reporting unfavorable views of American Muslims in particular and global Muslims in general. Number 5, many Americans view in general that Islam is peaceful and that it does not condone terrorism, but when asked about Islam in comparison to other religions, most viewed it as violent. And number 6, attitudes. Attitudes on Muslims' place in American society are dependent upon the context. So really it's about what are we doing as a community that will dictate the attitudes in general about Islam and Muslims. And most have been wary of Muslims, in fact, going into the White House. However, and this is quite interesting, the majority thought bans on female headscarves, it's a bad idea. Okay? And I testify to the fact that we do have freedoms here in the United States that we cannot take for granted. So I believe very strongly as a United States citizen, first and foremost born and raised here, and also as a Muslim, that this is my country equally as anybody else's here. I have a right to be here, and so do you. So, America being a pluralistic society, the fact that 1, it can't be because that we are respected around the world for our education system. It can't be because of our health care. So why is it that America is looked up to across the world? we have no other recourse but to start thinking is because of our pluralistic society, because of our diversity, because we simply can come together in a forum like this in a peaceful and civic manner and understand walking away a little bit better about who we are.